All right. Welcome to the Alan and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show. Oh, welcome to the Alan and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show. How you doing so far today, Chad?
Hey, how you going?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us. It's for people who don't know, this is the grandson of the late great Dave Sands. We have Chad Ritchie Sands joining us. So glad you could join us all the way from Australia too. So how you been?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, things are going good, except for the COVID situation at the moment over here. We've all sort of come out of lockdown now, so yeah, just waiting to see what 2022 brings.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the COVID situation is fluid. It's something that's up and down. So you just got out of quarantine for everybody?
Yeah, well, we had restrictions and that. We're locked down in our council areas, and we're having to wear masks in a lot of places and check in with this QR code. And yeah, it was. I think for people's mental health, especially, it was really tough on people. Yeah, but I think it gave a real perspective on what matters in life, and actually taking a bit of time out and self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right about that. It's really the most important thing is your health and making sure that you get along with people. And during this time, it teaches you kind of how to do things without socialization, which is unique in a way. It's a unique challenge.
Yeah, it was something that I started off, and I was like, I don't want to put weight on in lockdown. I want to try and get it off and get fit and get healthy. And yeah, and I ran every day. And then I ended up with a personal trainer to help me out. And yeah, haven't felt this good in years. So yeah, it actually worked the opposite for me. So, which was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. You get a chance to stay fit. That's right. Your health is your wealth. So it's always a good thing to do that. Stay healthy. And, it, right now, I understand that, definitely the loss of your grandfather is very hard. And I did see that you had to put a nice video up there, a tribute of him. What made you decide to put that YouTube video of memories of the late, great Dave Sands?
Look, I just want his memory to be kept alive. My nan passed away. His wife passed away a few years ago now. And one thing I always said to myself is that, I'll make sure that I keep their memories alive and keep the stories going. And what he did, especially in Australia, but also over the world, he was a great sportsman, but also a great family man as well. He was only 26 when he died. He'd had 110 fights, and for a man back then, especially an Aboriginal man, it was very tough. It was tough in times in the 40s and 50s. Racism was well and truly alive, and look, Pop never seen the differences in colour or anything. That he treated everyone exactly the same, and he'd give you his last dollar and help anyone out. He did a lot of charity work, especially in Australia, and he would never ask for money to do it. He'd always be willing to, spar some rounds, go and make appearances, and do whatever it took to help people. So I think his caring nature in that, and his story needs to be told, so it's around for generations to come.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. He's definitely a legend there in Australia. In fact, the person who got us into this interview was Glenn Earnshaw, and got to give him credit, but he did say that unfortunate block that he lives on was the unfortunate block for the tragedy that happened for Mr. Sands. I don't know if you know that, but he did tell me that.
Yeah, it was look, when he was going, he said to my nan, look, I'll just take the family up and take him up bush, and then I'll be back that afternoon. And unfortunately, he never made it back. It was their 7th wedding anniversary at the time, on the same day. My nan went to the picture theatre, and my pop drove them up, and they stopped off. In Dungog, and unfortunately, when they left there, as they come to one of the passes in the road, they were doing some road works, and his truck, he started going down the wrong side, and someone in the back yelled out, you got to turn the wheel, Dave, and he turned the wheel, but it caught the grass, and it rolled over several times, and his chest was crushed against the steering wheel. When they got him out of the truck, he was still breathing and that, but then he lost consciousness. And when they took him to the hospital, I actually got a chance a few years ago to actually talk to the nurse, who actually, when he went into Dungog Hospital, she actually told me what had happened, and he never regained consciousness. He was just coughing up blood, and unfortunately, just had too much internal injuries, and there is a memorial there. We raised some money recently to have it redone, but because of COVID, it's been demolished, but we haven't had a chance to actually start the building of the new one. And I think, at 26 and passing away on your 7th wedding anniversary, Nan always talked about him. She never ever forgot who he was or what he was about. They had four kids together, 3 daughters and one son, who's my father. She was very proud of him, and especially back then, a non-Aboriginal woman with an Aboriginal man, it was always sort of frowned upon. It was never, looked on favourably. So, wherever Pop went, and the brothers, because all the brothers boxed as well. He had 5 other brothers, and they were called the Sands, the Fighting Sands, and he had one sister as well, Tiger Lil. So, they grew up in Burnt Bridge, Kempsey, New South Wales, and they did it hard. They had to leave school early. They also, their father died at a young age, so they it was only their mother. So they raised themselves pretty much, and they always looked after their mother. She lived up on Burnt Bridge Mission there, and they'd always send money back. They'd always make sure the bills were paid. Pop even brought her a little house that they put on wheels and wheeled out there onto the land. And it's an unfortunate thing that when he died, he never got the chance to really get to the point of fighting Sugar Ray Robinson or for the world middleweight title, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. He never got that opportunity, and I know he was working towards it when, unfortunately, this tragedy happened. How do you feel as if he would have maybe done if he did get the opportunity to fight Sugar Ray Robinson?
Well, he actually got the fight on Sugar Ray Robinson's undercard when they fought in England, when he lost the title. Actually, he lost the title to Randy Turpin, and there was a bit of problem with organising the fight, and he didn't get over in time to England, so he got to fight on the undercard against Mel Brown. And my pop actually watched ringside after his fight, and he said, "Look, I would have beat them both that night." Because obviously Sugar Ray was unfit that time when he was over in England, and probably took Randy Turpin a bit lightly. Look, I think, when I went to America, when he was inducted in the World Boxing Hall of Fame, and I was talking to Sandy Sadler, and he said to me, your grandfather had one of the best left hooks, and he could have won the world title. And, even Carl Bobo Olsen, when he did win the world title, he said that this title belongs to Dave Sands, if he was still alive. And they fought 2 times, and Dave beat them both times. And one thing that people don't know is that my grandfather and Carl Bobo Olsen fought the first fight that was televised coast to coast in America. So he's got that record. And a lot of people don't know that, but that was the first televised fight, coast to coast in America.
Is there anything about, Mr. Dave Sands that a lot of people maybe don't know or maybe don't have all the facts correct that you want to clear up on our show?
He was a family man. He held 5 titles when he died. He never lost any titles in the ring. So he was middleweight, light heavyweight, Australasian light heavyweight, Australian champion, and the Commonwealth title, which was the British Empire back then. Some of the fights that he lost, he fought up in weight. He was fighting light heavyweights. He was only ever stopped once in his career, and that was due to a cut. But that was against Yolande Pompey, who was a lot bigger than Dave. He had him gone, but then Yolande come back and stopped Dave. The referee waved it off. But other than that, I think when he was training, he had a backyard gym. He only did 5 rounds of everything. So he'd do 5 laps. He'd do, floor to ceiling ball 5 times. But his main thing for keeping fit was sparring. He'd spar rounds after rounds. And a lot of the boys, a lot of the brothers would, they didn't like how Dave hit. Dave hit too hard for some of them, and they'd go running out of the shed. So they'd run down to the house. But they were a really close family. They all looked after each other, and whoever had money was the king for the day, and they'd go they'll go to the cinemas a lot. And a few of them would get a bit sick and tired because Pop would actually watch movie after movie after movie. And I think one thing that I'd like to see is that he's inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame as well. I mean, he's got the World Boxing Hall of Fame and he's got all the Hall of Fames over here. But I think that would be the pinnacle. I know that he's been nominated a few times, but to actually succeed in that part and actually have him inducted in the International Boxing Hall of Fame would be, something that I'd really, really love. And for him to actually receive that honour. He was voted most popular sportsman 3 years running. So he won the Sports Nobel Belt. It used to be like a magazine over in Australia. It's not around anymore. So the most popular sportsman. And I think one thing, he was a jokester. He liked playing jokes on everyone. He was, Nan would always say he was a real gentle soul outside the ring, but if you got him inside the ring, it was a different story. But he'd actually go easy on some opponents, so he didn't like hurting people. He didn't actually like fighting, to be honest, but he was good at it. So, and just before he died, he sort of said to Nan that he didn't know how much longer he was going to keep boxing for. That all he wanted to do was buy a house for his family, and also he wanted to buy a pub as well. But he died penniless. The 30,000 pounds that he earned during his ring career went on training fees and his manager and also helping the family as well. A person by the name of Reg Grundy who had a few television shows in Australia, he helped get together a collection, and they helped pay off the house for Nan after my grandfather died, and they also put some money away in for the kids up until they were 16. And I think that was the kind of man that and the way that he was regarded. I've seen telegrams from all over the world that when he died he received, and I think that he really made his mark for such a young man, an Aboriginal young man, especially in times were tough. He travelled all over. He was going to England. He fought in Chicago in the US, and he did it at months on end as well. Which was tough. It was tough on him and his family. Like when he did pass, my nan was pregnant with my auntie. So he, yeah. So they had to contend with that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's really sad, and at the same time, it shows how giving he was, and that may have led to him, as you're seeing, not having much money left over because of the fact of how much he gave to help other people. Talk about that a little bit. His heart of giving.
Yeah, he'd so what one of the stories was that he went down to Wagga. He was meant to go down there, and it was for a charity night, and he was actually late because of there was flooding. So he went down there. He finally made it down, and he said to them, "Look, to make up for it, I'll come back and I'll defend any title you want me to defend." And he actually did. That was his last fight against Jim Woods. He went down and defended a title, and he won, obviously. But he also would go out to the showgrounds and give exhibitions and that with to raise money for certain elderly homes, and he'd go down to the troops down at Holsworthy in New South Wales, so the army troops, and give exhibitions there. He'd never ask for any money; he'd just come down, do it, and then go back home. And he was widely regarded and respected by people. People would stop in the streets to watch him run or watch him train. And he'd always give whatever he had, especially, whether it was training gear or, some of his shorts, or take photos with kids and adults. And he always, back then, they always liked to dress to impress. So, nothing was out of place. They always wore a suit and, were respectable. And there was no real trash talking back then. It was all about how you are as a person and how you're perceived. And that was one thing. He never ever said anything ill about any of his opponents. And that was one thing that Nan always said, that he always made sure that he showed respect.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like a one heck of a person, both inside and outside the ring. And you mentioned that you would really want him to make the International Boxing Hall of Fame. What has happened in the tries prior when it went up for nomination?
I haven't actually pushed anything forward myself, but I have seen that he has been nominated a few times and he's missed out on votes. And I'm not sure how the voting system works. With that, in previous years, I know that he has missed out, and so it's something that I have to investigate and try and push to get him in there. I think he deserves it, because a lot of people back, like these days, don't realise that back in those days there was only one champion. There was only one champion in each division, and you had to beat the best to be the best. And for him to be ranked number one contender for the world title at the time, was an amazing feat. And I think these days, and it's not to take away from the boxers these days, because I think, everyone works hard and everyone always wants to win a title, but it comes down to what people want to see. People want to see more championship world title boxing. They don't want to watch just boxing. They want to make sure it's for a title all the time. And I think sometimes that takes away from the sport. Obviously, hats off to, all the boxers and all the people that step into the ring, because, it's hard getting through those ropes and fighting against someone that you don't know. You've never met before. They've never said anything about you, and you've never said anything about them. But, it's a sport, and it's an amazing sport. It gives people a lot of hope, and it gives people a chance to actually, make something of themselves and provide for their family. And I think, that's something that everyone aspires to do if they get into the boxing game.
And speaking of that, have you got into boxing yourself? You tried
I,
to.
when I was younger, I was very much into boxing. I love my boxing, amateur boxing and that. And, I got to a certain point, and I got disheartened by the sport. You'd win a fight and you wouldn't get the decision, and you'd have to be disciplined too. So some of the times I wouldn't put in the work that was needed, and I only let myself down. I've got in and sparred with world champions and fighters that have reached the pinnacle, and some really good fighters and great fighters, and it's always helped me to be disciplined. But with my discipline, it hasn't been enough to actually kick on. And I went through a patch there where I left the sport altogether for a long time, and I don't think, if you really want to make it in this sport, you can't chop and change. You've either got to dedicate yourself to it and stick with it to actually do something really, really great. And I've seen mates that have won world titles and things like that, and that's great for them. And I think that anyone that can step through those ropes takes a lot of guts. And the everyday armchair critic, I think, doesn't appreciate it enough. They think that, I would have got that hook, or I would have got that overhand right. And, I would have been able to duck this and that. But it's a different ball game when you're in the ring. Yeah. So yeah, but I still, I still like being around the sport. I still like going and watching the sport, and trying to, if I can get some training in every now and then, but it's few and far between these days. I mainly just stick to doing some weights and some running. Yeah, try and keep my face a bit pretty.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And for the boxers who are aspiring, who are motivated by watching this interview, what specifically did you do that you felt like you wasn't as disciplined in? Was it the training part?
Look, up until when I got to 18, I was dedicated, and nothing was going to get in my way. When I went to America and I received the award for my grandfather inducted in the World Boxing Hall of Fame, they wanted to bring me back and train there and to try and make the Olympic team. And my dad and mum said no to it, which it would have been hard, because I would have been moving to Los Angeles by myself, but I would have been looked after. And it was sort of a missed opportunity. And what the biggest thing was, when I first met alcohol, I'd go out and it was binge drinking. It was like, meaning I wouldn't drink all the time, but I wasn't disciplined enough to say no to alcohol. And I got myself into trouble before the Olympic trials. We had to have a round robin competition. It was going to happen in New South Wales, and I was training right up. And then I thought, I'll go out for Christmas, and I went out and I cut my hand open pretty badly, and I had a fight in a nightclub. And unfortunately, I cut my hand open and had to have surgery and that. And then from then on, I just wasn't dedicated. I always thought that talent could get you places, and I think that that's the biggest misconception. You've got to work hard. And by seeing someone like George Kambosos Jr. Only recently winning those world titles was unbelievable, and a great credit to himself and his family, and for Australian boxing. It's put Australian boxing back on the map again in a big way. And I think if you dedicate yourself, you stay away from alcohol, you stay away from drugs, and you stay away from all the other bits and pieces, then you'll actually make it. It's when you start becoming civilized and you think, I can have one drink here, or I can, go out with the boys and party, or whatever it may be, that's when the wheels start falling off. If you're going to do something, you really got to dedicate yourself 100% and just stick to it and do it until, because not everyone's going to be a world champion, but, it depends how much you want things, how hungry you are. And you've always got to be listening and always understanding how you can improve. And that's something that, I got disillusioned with the sport, and I got disillusioned with myself. I think when you go into your 20s and that, you're looking for where you belong in the world, or you're thinking everything comes easy, and it doesn't. And hard work, and
No, you're absolutely right. And, it's definitely a great testimony you had there because, one of the lessons I've learned is hard work beats talent when talent's hardly working. And that always is true. But you brought up a great example, George Kambosos Jr. Definitely congratulations on his big win. What'd you think of him winning his big fight there in Australia? Representing
I
Australia, I should say.
Yeah, look, George has always been a quiet achiever. I've seen a few of his fights, a couple of local um, uh, fight nights and that, and for him to beat Lopez and really stamp his authority on the division was unbelievable. And he believed in himself, like he said. You know, hardly anyone gave him a chance. So he shocked the world, but he didn't just shock it in a little way. He shocked it in a big way. And I think, look, George has got bigger fights to come, and he's going to bring them to Australia. And I think that's great. I think, to give the exposure to not only himself, but also the people that will be on his undercards will be great for the sport. And I think he's up there with the best of them in Australia now. I think that he can keep winning if he wants. And I don't think he's the type of person that's going to lose that hunger. I don't think he's going to be too composed or relaxed. I think he's got those belts and he wants to keep them, which, some people, they get those belts and they become really relaxed and they think that they're always going to have those belts. But, you're only one punch away from losing them.
Right, exactly. That's a great testimony that you got to stay hungry. You got to keep going after it and keep fighting, and don't take anybody for granted. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier is that you had trouble with the tribute. What do you want us to do as far as here that we can support you to get that tribute back on that street?
I think it's just like we've got the money. It's just about getting up to do it. But I think the biggest thing for me is trying to get enough support to actually get my grandfather's name in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. I think that would be a great testimony because, if I was still alive to see it, I'd definitely be over there to help be a part of it. And, when I was only 17 at the time when he was inducted in the World Boxing Hall of Fame. And, I was sitting around with world champions that I'd never heard of before, but they were legends. Carmen Basilio, Sugar Shane Mosley was the fighter of the year that year. And that's when he was, I think he'd just beaten, from memory, I think he'd just beaten Oscar De La Hoya too. So, and I went up on stage to accept the award and in front of, thousands of people. And I mean, that in itself, was just mind blowing. It was absolutely, amazing.
Yeah, that is definitely a great experience at such a young age too, that you've had to experience that. And I'm going to check into that here at the Ellen and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show about Dave Sands getting the International Boxing Hall of Fame. I'm going to see what we can do on our end to help support you, because it boggles the mind why he wouldn't be entered into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. His record is stellar. I'm just really surprised, and I wish you could tell us a little bit more of that's the case.
Yeah, I think I have messaged them before, but it's hard because you on their website and that I don't actually have the proper contact. I've only contacted them through I think it was Facebook. But yeah, just to try and I think obviously back then a lot of the people that were in charge of it and that kind of thing would have passed on, but over time, but. I really, that's where I'd like to get to. I mean, he's in everything else, and I think that he definitely has earned his place and deserves his place there because, I mean, by all accounts, what everyone said to me, he would have been world champion. It was just some poor management decisions. A lot of people don't know that my grandfather didn't like drinking. and he didn't like. So when he'd go overseas, but his old manager trainer, Tom Maguire, would be drinking, and he'd come back to the motel and that, and my grandfather didn't like it, especially when he was training. So they actually had a bit of a falling out, and my grandfather, when he died, was being managed by Bede Kerr, another manager in Australia. So a lot of people don't know the backstory to that. They wouldn't even realise that it even happened. But they went through a legal battle, and my grandfather had to pay a certain amount of money to Tom Maguire up until I think it expired. So yeah, but he had fights under Jack Solomon, who was a famous British promoter over there. And when he first went over there, he actually struggled a bit with homesickness, and they took him up to a place in England called Newcastle as well. And they put him he was in a hotel, and he had a friend that was a chef that they became friends over time. And he used to cook all of his meals, and that really helped my grandfather start to feel at home and start to really change the way that he was fighting, because when he first went over there, he was struggling a bit with homesickness and just wasn't living up to the hype that people had put on him. But I mean, styles make fights sometimes, and there's different fighters out there, and you can be the best fighter in the world, but against certain opponents, they can make you look ordinary and or cruel to fight. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. Styles make fights, and definitely you got to stay disciplined when you're being a boxer, as you mentioned. And definitely we want to support you here at the Alan and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show. I'm going to check into that International Boxing Hall of Fame and see what I can do to pull some strings to see if he can get in, because he definitely deserves it. I mean, it's his record is unfathomable. I'm sorry about the unfortunate tragedy, and I hope you do get that tribute up and looking good, because I would love to see it one day. And so
yeah, no, definitely. And one thing, he's got about 5 different memorials across New South Wales or Australia, and for an Aboriginal man back then, it just goes to show what an impact he did make. So he's talked about in a lot of circles, but a lot of people are starting to pass away, and obviously I want to be able to keep that memory alive and pass on his legacy to other young boxers, but also young Aboriginal men and women as well.
Absolutely, and definitely such an inspiration. And the question I have is, how do like he was just right next to you? All these stories, it's a remarkable.
Yeah, it's I'd always ask questions to my nan when I was younger, and I'd always read up about him. And there was a few books that were done, and there's a couple that are being written at the moment by certain people. But it was just like it was mainly Nan. I mean, Nan would tell me, and it's a pity that before, like I never thought about it when before she was passing, but when she had a stroke, she went in for an operation, had a stroke, and it wasn't until after that I thought, because she couldn't actually speak properly after she had the stroke, and I thought, I should have been filming a lot of her discussions and that, and so for later on in life. But I mean, they're the chances that you miss out on, and it's just through listening and asking questions that I'm able to remember some of the stories. They used to get up to shenanigans as well, like Pop brought back a dingo from up the bush one time, and the dingo, like a wild dog in Australia, he brought it back down to the house, and it was going around and bailing up, so holding up the butcher at the shop, and so the butcher would have to give it meat all the time to get it away. And Nan made him take it back up the bush and leave it. But the boys had always, how they stayed fit too. I should have said earlier, they used to timber cut. So they'd do old school with an axe, with a saw, and they'd cut logs for the railway and sleepers. And that was one other aspect that they kept fit. That's how they, if they were going to start a training camp, they'd go away and cut logs as well, where, you don't see many of the fighters doing it these days.
That's
and
right.
I think, look, people are trying to invent new ways of training, but I think the fundamentals, the basics of boxing are always going to be there. And I think, sparring and, even cutting timber and, the floor to ceiling ball and skipping and running's one of the main things, sticking to the fundamentals to, really and do it good and train hard.
That's right. Words to live by. Train hard, stick to the fundamentals, stick to the basics, stay hungry. Definitely. I appreciate you joining us here on the Allen and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show. This is Chad Ritchie Sands, and we're going to support you here. We're going to make sure that we do our part to research that, to get him in International Boxing Hall of Fame. And if you please keep us posted on that tribute that you want to get redone. And I'm glad that we're able to share his memories to you. And definitely, we appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to leave the fans of Dave Sands and yourself with before we disembark?
There's a Dave Sands Facebook page, and there's also a Dave Sands, it's called Dave Sands Boxer Instagram page. So anyone that wants to jump on and you'll see heaps of photos, and also little stories or videos and that as well, and you'll be able to keep up to date. But that they're some of the things that I've set up to help keep his memory alive and tell his story.
Awesome. So Dave Sands on Instagram and Facebook. Make sure you guys follow and like the page. We will do that here at the Allen and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show for sure, and keep his memory alive. And definitely, we really appreciate your time, and definitely be safe out there. Happy holidays to you and your family, and be well.
Same to you too.
Thank you so much. God bless.
See ya. Bye.
Bye for now.